I wedged the portable speaker under my arm, straightened my plastic lantern, and prayed, not to any particular deity, just to the collective power of light switches, that tonight's haunted heritage hype would be quieter than last week's. Last week, I'd mispronounced Banshee, screamed at my own echo, and refunded half the group after fainting into a decorative shrub. Corporate had smiled through gritted teeth and reminded me, yet again, that a guiding professional must never appear alarmed. So, naturally, they scheduled me on Halloween Eve. "Good evening, Spectre Seekers," I announced, voice climbing an octave higher than usual. A dozen tourists blinked beneath the dim glow of the fountain's gas lamps. There was the usual demographic spread: a retired couple clad in matching rain slickers, two goth teenagers who looked bored on principle, a bachelorette party wearing luminous veils, and a silent man in a beige trench coat who appeared to be taking soil samples. Everyone, I presumed, was braver than I. I clicked my lantern's faux flame into life. It projected a cheerful pumpkin face on the cobblestones. Unfortunately, the stenciled grin looked more demonic than festive. I swallowed. "Our journey begins here in Maltby Square," I said, consulting the script stitched to the inside of my jacket sleeve. Reading it sometimes calmed me. Sometimes, "Many a doomed soul met their end within 20 feet of where you stand." Isn't that exciting? I didn't mean for the last word to crack like a broken attic door, but it did. A bachelorette named Carly giggled and clinked miniature champagne bottles with her bridesmaids. The goth teens raised synchronized eyebrows. I pressed play on the speaker. Ominous pipe organ music issued forth, though it sounded more like an asthmatic accordion due to the batteries dying. "Legend tells of the Phantom Piper," I continued, "who can be heard each night mourning his lost love." I realized too late that my hoo-hoo sounded less like a ghost and more like an owl with confidence issues. Still, a few tourists shivered, probably out of courtesy. We marched toward Gallow Drop Alley. The cobbles there are warped like chipped teeth, and the street lamps lean as if perpetually listening to gossip. I flared the lantern. Shadows skittered, looking suspiciously three-dimensional. "If you inhale deeply," I said, "you may catch a whiff of gunpowder and regret, remnants of the 1792 duel between Captain Redford and Baron Hicks." The group dutifully sniffed. So did I by reflex, which was a mistake because my overactive imagination supplied the tang of brimstone. Instinctively, I coughed, startling myself further. The tourists waited expectantly. "Redford's bullet missed," I said, voice wobbling. "But Hicks's didn't. They say his dying breath still echoes between these walls." I paused for the canned dying breath sound effect, an airy, tremulous sigh I'd recorded last summer. Unfortunately, I'd forgotten to delete my commentary at the end, so what played was, Did that sound too cheesy? I think it's too cheesy. A pair of bridesmaids snorted laughter. The trench coat man scribbled in a notebook, possibly rating my competence at 2/10. We continued. Somewhere overhead a shutter clacked. I yelped. A pigeon flapped away, indignant. I converted my yelp into a theatrical flourish, bowing at the alleyway. "Ah, the restless spirits greet us," the goth girl whispered to her friend. "Pretty sure that was a bird." I made a mental note never to underestimate teenagers with black lipstick and unlimited data plans. At Widow's Weep Bridge, I stopped again, mostly to catch my breath and to gather what remained of my dignity. The river below looked greasy, mirroring a half moon. Widow's Weep is only 5 feet above the water, but in the 19th century it was the tallest structure around, high enough for melodramatic tragedy. "Behold," I declared, "the site of tempestuous heartbreak. On this very balustrade, Eliza Hemings flung herself into the churning depths after discovering her fiancé's betrayal." "That explains the wet ghost in your promo brochure," someone muttered. "Yes, exactly," I said. "Tour guests often report seeing her pale form rising from the currents, her white dress." I choked, because as if on cue, a gauzy shape bobbed up in the water, catching the moonlight like damp ectoplasm. My knees almost abandoned ship. The group leaned over the rail. "Is that her?" Carly squealed. I squinted. The shape rotated, revealing itself as a dishwasher-sized garbage bag. I fast-forwarded in my brain to the part of the script that said, "Don't freak out when illusions fail," but the page might as well have been blank. She sometimes appears as a plastic veil, I improvised, symbolic of consumerist heartbreak. The goth smirked admiringly. Postmodern subtext was catnip to them. I exhaled. Moving on, I clapped, a bit too loudly. My lantern flickered. The rechargeable battery gauge dipped into the red zone. Perfect. Our next destination was Brackenbury Cemetery, accessible through an iron gate that squealed like bagpipes being stepped on. I unlocked it with the ceremonial key, which is really just my apartment key painted bronze. The cemetery grass was crisp with frost, headstones jutted out like crooked teeth. A stagehand named Harold was supposed to hide behind the oldest crypt and rattle chains for added ambience. I prayed he'd remembered. Listen closely, I whispered, for here lie the unrestful. Sometimes they speak. The wind answered with a lonely hush. My breath fogged. Someone's phone chimed with a cheerful notification. They silenced it sheepishly. I guided the group to the Carey Mausoleum, the tour's crown jewel, known locally as the Stone Sneeze, because the cherub statues look allergic to moss. Legend says the mausoleum door sometimes swings open by itself, inviting visitors inside, where it promptly shuts, trapping them in darkness until dawn. It's nonsense, naturally. The hinges are warped, and there's a raccoon inside who likes pushing things. But I never share that tidbit. Fear sells tickets. See the door, I said, aiming my lantern's wan glow at the marble slab. Note the scratches from panicked victims. Behind me, Harold was conspicuously absent. No chain rattle, no theatrical moan. I cleared my throat, hoping the tourists didn't notice. The mausoleum door creaked open. I hadn't hired that door to perform tonight. My spinal cord tried to exit through my scalp. The tourists gasped. Even Beige Trenchcoat looked up from his soil sample. Ah, I squeaked. The invitation? The door continued opening until it revealed pitch absolute. The raccoon, if present, was on break. A bridesmaid nudged the bride. We should go in for a photo. I needed to regain control. With trembling authority, I said, only the bravest dare cross the threshold. I'm brave, declared a goth teen, stepping forward. Hold, valiant one, I interjected. It is customary that the guide enter first to ensure spiritual safety. I cursed past me for writing that line. The group parted like an eager Red Sea. I had no choice. If I refused, refunds would rain upon me like confetti at a clown funeral. I swallowed, lifted the lantern, and approached the door. The mausoleum smelled of damp stone and something metallic. Not blood, I told myself, but perhaps old coins. My sneakers squeaked against the marble floor. I heard the door hinge groan behind me as a gust nudged it further. Shadows cluttered the corners like misfiled paperwork. Show confidence, I reminded myself. Say the words. In 1863, I began, voice reverberating. Jonathan Carey commissioned this shrine for his thud. Something in the darkness knocked. My pulse detonated. For his beloved wife, Mary Ann. I continued, sweat ping-ponging along my spine. Another thud, followed by a skittering noise. The raccoon, hopefully? I forced my lantern higher. Battery drained, it produced lighting fit only for a dollhouse. A shape darted across the floor. Probably a cat, I lied aloud. From outside, Carly shouted, "Tell her we say hi." "Will do," I squeaked. Just finish the monologue, I thought. Then run. Jonathan allegedly buried her with a cursed opal. They say anyone who disturbs the gem, the speaker in my pocket, still Bluetooth paired, chose that moment to hiss static, then play the next track, an experimental soundscape titled Ectoplasmic Wind Tunnel I downloaded for research. It began with a childlike voice whispering, "I see you, ooh." I executed a vertical leap that would have qualified for an Olympic tryout, then accidentally flung my lantern. It clattered across the marble, died completely, and surrendered the mausoleum to darkness. 5 long seconds passed. Someone outside asked, "Everything okay?" My mouth produced no words, only a confidential wheeze. I fumbled with my phone flashlight. The skittering returned. I aimed the beam. 2 glassy eyes reflected, a raccoon wearing what looked like a baby-sized top hat, probably scavenged from a discarded doll. He regarded me with contempt, thumped his little paws, and vanished behind a sarcophagus. Relief made my knees soggy. Just the guardian spirit, I called, voice heroic again. I have appeased him. I stumbled outside, dusting phantom cobwebs off my jacket. The group clapped politely, mistaking my terror for theatrical commitment. A tip jar might have filled then and there if we had a tip jar. We retreated from the cemetery. At the gate, Harold emerged sheepishly from behind a willow. "Sorry, boss," he whispered. I tried rattling, but I saw a raccoon wearing a hat and panicked. "Understandable," I muttered. "Stage fright happens to the best of us." The speaker, dangling from my belt, resumed its playlist, now on haunted harpsichord hits. I let it play. Background noise calms me. Our route curved toward Kester House, an abandoned manor perched above town like a disgruntled gargoyle. The council installs floodlights to discourage trespassers, but budget cuts left only one bulb working, bathing the mansion in a sickly spotlight that screamed, definitely haunted. I unlocked the temporary gate erected for the tour. "Mind the steps, the last one bites," I joked, instantly regretting the mental image. The staircase groaned under 12 pairs of feet. My own foot caught on a warped plank, and I face-hugged air before regaining balance. Drunk with adrenaline, I resumed narration. "Kester House dates back to 1711, built by Captain Silas Kester, renowned smuggler and amateur taxidermist." "Is that why there's a stuffed beaver in the window?" asked Trenchcoat. I looked. Sure enough, behind a cracked pane sat a mummified beaver wearing a ribbon. I did not plant that prop. "Yes," I said thinly, "one of his infamous creations. Score one for accidental historical authenticity." Inside, the foyer smelled of mildew and pine-scented vandalism. We stuck to the safe path marked with glow tape. I switched to the section of my script titled, "The Portrait Hallway of Uneasy Ancestry." Paintings of various Kesters lined the corridor, their oils flaking like pastry. "Portrait eyes follow you by optical illusion. Tonight they sprinted. Notice their lifelike gaze," I said, attempting bravado. "In fact, the eyes of Captain Silas are rumored to blink when—" Captain Silas blinked. I know, logically, that paint cannot move, but the tiny shift of shadow around his eyelids was unmistakable. Maybe a draft fluttered loose canvas? Maybe the beaver coughed? Either way, I squealed sort of a malfunctional tea kettle noise and jumped sideways into a dusty side table, knocking over an umbrella stand that clanged like a church bell. The group gasped. The Goths lit up like Christmas. "That was awesome!" I righted the umbrella stand with trembling hands. "Ah, the captain demonstrates his presence." Sweat pooled under my collar. "Shall we proceed to the attic of whispers?" The bachelorette squad whooped alcohol works marvels. Up we went, steps creaking like arthritic bones. The attic door stood crooked at the top landing, secured earlier with a discreet wedge so it wouldn't slam, except now it was open. Air exhaled from it, smelling of dust and maybe cinnamon? Hard to tell through the fog of existential dread. "I think someone's up there," murmured Rain Slicker husband. "Nonsense," I laughed hollowly. "Just air currents." I ascended first, shining my phone beam. The attic sprawled wider than I remembered, cluttered with antique trunks and broken furniture draped in sheets. My flashlight carved tunnels through dust. Something metallic glinted on the floor. I stooped, an old skeleton key, size of a baby's arm. "That wasn't in the setup," I whispered. Then realized I'd whispered aloud. "What wasn't in the setup?" asked Goth. My diet plan," I said. "I didn't schedule a carbohydrate, yet here's the key carbs. Ha! Zero laughs. Never mind." The sound of children giggling drifted across the attic. Delicate, echoing, definitely not from my speaker. It was still playing harpsichord downstairs. My heart backflipped. Carly whispered, "Did you hire kids?" I shook my head minutely. The giggle came again, followed by a scuff of tiny shoes. A sheet near the far window stirred. I was preparing a dignified feint when the sheet lifted, revealing two small figures, Harold's nieces, each clutching a bag of candy corn, eyes wide. "Uncle Harold!" They peeped. Harold, red-faced, hurried forward. "Girls, you were supposed to wait outside until we finished." "They got bored," said Harold's sister, stepping into view. She shrugged an apology at me. Trick-or-treat plans changed. Thought we'd surprise you here. Surprise succeeded. My lungs performed solo screaming internally. The tourists, however, were charmed. Best cameo ever, someone said. I tugged Harold aside. Next time, please label the jump scares, child actors, in the schedule. He nodded vigorously. The nieces waved adorably at the group, then retreated downstairs for leftover snacks like tiny poltergeists seeking sugar. My composure shredded, but the tour needed closure. I ushered everyone back outside, down the steps, onto the moonlit lawn where the final anecdote awaited. The lantern finale. Traditionally, I'd gather guests in a circle, dim my light, and recite a poem promising eternal vigilance from the spirits. Tonight, my lantern was dead, my voice hoarse, and my nerves stapled to the roof of my mouth. But we'd come too far to skip. I positioned everyone under the surviving floodlight. Ladies, gentlemen, and raccoon enthusiasts, I croaked, you have braved restless souls and flickering histories, but remember, a car alarm erupted nearby, stabbing the night. I jumped so high my shoe came off. The alarm belonged to my own hatchback parked across the street. Its headlights flashed like paparazzi. I'd evidently leaned on the panic button. The group roared with laughter. Even Trenchcoat chuckled, though his face barely changed. I hopped into my remaining shoe, retrieved the escapee, and silenced the alarm. Indeed, I said, returning. The dead are not the only ones restless. Applause thundered, part sarcastic, part genuine. I took a trembling bow. Thank you for touring, I said. Tips appreciated but not required. Compliments accepted, therapy contributions preferred. Carly approached as the others dispersed. That was the funniest, scariest tour I've done, she said. Were you really terrified or was that acting? I opened my mouth to claim master thespian status, but honesty won. Terrified, I admitted. But in a professional way, she grinned. Makes it better. We're recommending you to everyone. Great, I thought. Job security through perpetual panic. She rejoined her entourage, which drifted down the street singing Ghostbusters off-key. Harold trudged over. Boss, you good? I glanced at the cemetery gate, the mausoleum silhouette, the mansion's attic window where a raccoon now waved the tiny top hat like farewell. I will be, I said. After a gallon of chamomile tea and maybe a lifelong sabbatical, he clapped my shoulder. Next tour's in 2 nights, I whimpered. I'll write a calmer script. On my walk back to the square, fog curled around lamppost bases like pale cats. My speaker, forgotten in my pocket, skipped playlists and piped up with that whisper again. I see you. You. I nearly threw it into the river, but restraint prevailed. I shut it off, stuffing it deep. 1 step, 2 steps. The night was suddenly beautiful, cool, quiet, and once again under my control. Then, from an alley, a soft voice, "Excuse me?" I spun, heart ready to sprint. A woman in Victorian dress stood there, face gray as old newsprint, eyes luminous. She extended a gloved hand. "Could you direct me to Widow's Weep Bridge?" she asked. "Remember the plastic bag," my brain begged. Probability says costume or historical reenactor, but my body had clocked out, leaving terror in charge. "Straight ahead," I squeaked, pointing, "and take the, left at the Crow," she curtsied. "Much obliged." As she passed under the lamplight, her form flickered once twice, then dissolved like breath on glass. I remained rooted. No camera, no audience, no paycheck. Just a guide alone, with a script he could never trust again. A pigeon fluttered overhead. I shrieked, sprinted the remaining block home, and decided my next tour would be a daytime architectural walk. Buildings, after all, rarely blink.